I am 83 years old now, and my hands tremble when I hold a cup of tea. The doctors say it is age, but I believe it is memory. Some memories shake you long after your bones have grown fragile. Some memories never let your hands rest. And there is one memory that visits me more often than the others. It was the day I learned that my skin had a voice louder than my dreams. I did not know that yet, of course. That morning, I only knew hope. I was 19 years old when I left my mother's house with a borrowed dress and a heart full of courage. The sun had barely risen, and the sky was still painted in soft shades of pink and gold, like the world itself was wishing me luck. Mama stood at the doorway, arms folded tight against her chest. She always did that when she was worried. "You sure about this, Lillian?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the fear hiding underneath. "I am, Mama," I told her. "They said they're hiring at the textile office downtown. Secretary position. Good pay. Real office work." Mama pressed her lips together. Office work. Those words meant dignity. Clean hands. A desk instead of a mop. Respect instead of pity. It meant I would not have to scrub other people's floors the way she had for 30 years. "You remember what I told you?" she said quietly. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She stepped closer and adjusted the collar of my dress. It wasn't mine. It belonged to Mrs. Carter, one of the houses Mama cleaned. She had given it to me after I graduated high school. It was pale blue, simple but beautiful. Mama touched my cheek. "You walk in there like you belong," she said. "Don't let nobody make you feel smaller than God made you." I smiled at her, though my stomach twisted into knots. "I will." She didn't smile back. Instead, she hugged me tight, so tight I could feel her heartbeat racing against my chest. That should have told me something. But youth has a way of believing the world is kinder than it truly is. The bus ride into town took 30 minutes, but it felt like an hour. Every bump on the road made my nerves jump. I clutched my small purse against my lap like it held my future inside. Maybe it did. Inside were 3 things. My high school diploma, a pencil, and a folded sheet of paper with the address of the office. I kept touching the diploma through the purse fabric, as if it might disappear. I had worked hard for that piece of paper. Studied late by candlelight when the electricity failed. Ignored the laughter of boys who said girls like me didn't need education. "Why study?" they would say. "You'll end up cleaning houses anyway." But I believed in something more. Or maybe I just wanted to. The bus hissed to a stop downtown, and my breath caught in my throat. Tall buildings surrounded me. Real city buildings made of brick and glass. Men in suits walked quickly along the sidewalks, holding briefcases like they carried secrets inside them. Women wore pressed skirts and tidy shoes. They looked important. They looked like they belonged. I whispered to myself, "You belong too." I said it twice, just to make sure my heart believed it. The building stood on the corner of Maple and 3rd Street. 4 stories tall. White stone walls. Wide glass doors that reflected the morning sun. Above the entrance, shiny gold letters read, "Harrington Textiles Administration." My legs felt weak. I stood there for a moment, staring at those doors like they were the gates to another world. And in many ways they were. Inside those doors, I believed, was the life I had been dreaming of. Inside those doors, I thought, was proof that hard work mattered more than anything else. More than poverty. More than struggle. More than skin. I took a deep breath and walked in. The lobby smelled like polish and paper. Everything shined. The floors were so clean I could see my reflection staring back at me. A long wooden desk sat near the far wall. Behind it, a woman with curled blonde hair flipped through papers, barely glancing up as people passed by. She looked neat. Perfect. Untouchable. I approached slowly, careful not to let my nervousness show. "Excuse me," I said politely. She looked up, and then her expression changed. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just slightly. But enough. Her eyes paused on my face, then drifted down my body, then back to my face again. That look. I would learn that look well over the years. The look that measured you before hearing your voice. The look that decided your worth before knowing your name. "Yes?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, clipped. Professional, but cold. "I'm here about the secretary position," I said. They posted a hiring notice last week. I held out my diploma with both hands, like an offering. She didn't take it. Instead, she leaned back slightly in her chair. "You sure you're in the right place?" she asked. The words landed like stones in my chest. "Yes, ma'am," I said carefully. "Harrington Textiles. Secretary opening." She studied me again. Longer this time. Then she sighed, like I had already exhausted her. "Sit over there," she said, pointing to a row of chairs against the wall. "Someone will call you." No smile. No welcome. Just instruction. Still, relief washed over me. I had not been turned away. Not yet. I walked to the chairs and sat down, smoothing my dress over my knees. Around me, other applicants waited. 3 women. All white. All dressed neatly. One of them glanced at me briefly before turning back to her magazine. Another stared openly. The third whispered something to the second. They both smiled. Not kindly. I pretended not to notice. Mama always said, sometimes pretending keeps your dignity alive. So I pretended. Pretended I didn't feel the weight of their eyes. Pretended my heart wasn't beating too fast. Pretended everything was normal. Minutes passed. Then more. One by one, the other women were called into an office behind the receptionist's desk. Miss Carter. Miss Reynolds. Miss Whitmore. Each name was spoken clearly. Each woman stood tall and confident as she walked through the door. And each time the door closed, silence returned. I waited. And waited. And waited. My hands began to sweat. My throat grew dry. Still I sat. Still I hoped. Finally, after what felt like hours, the receptionist looked up again. "Lillian Johnson." She said my name like it tasted bitter. I stood quickly. "Yes, ma'am." "Office 3, she said, pointing down the hallway. No smile. Not even once. Office 3 smelled like tobacco. A man sat behind a wide desk stacked with papers. He wore a gray suit and round glasses, and he didn't look up immediately when I entered. I stood there awkwardly, unsure what to do. Finally he spoke. "Sit." No greeting. No introduction. Just one word. I sat. He picked up my diploma, turning it slowly in his hands. "Finished high school," he muttered. "Yes, sir," I replied. "Typing?" "Yes, sir." "Shorthand?" "Yes, sir." He nodded slightly. Then he looked up. And when his eyes met mine, something shifted. Something hardened. It was subtle, but unmistakable. "You from the West Side?" he asked. "Yes, sir." The West Side. Where families like mine lived. Where opportunities rarely knocked. He leaned back in his chair. Silent. Thinking. Studying me like I was a problem he hadn't expected. "Well," he said finally. "We already filled the position this morning." The words hit me like a slap. My ears rang. I thought interviews were scheduled all day," I said quietly. He avoided my eyes. "Yes," he said. "But we found someone more suitable." More suitable. 2 words. Sharp as knives. I swallowed hard. "But I came early," I said. "I brought my diploma." He raised his hand, stopping me. "We'll keep your information on file," he said. A lie. Even at 19, I knew it was a lie. I walked out of that office with my head high. But inside, something had cracked. When I reached the lobby, the receptionist avoided looking at me. I stepped outside into the bright sunlight, blinking against the sudden glare. The world looked the same. The sky was still blue. The streets still busy. But something inside me had changed. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, not moving, not breathing properly, not understanding. Then I saw her. One of the white girls who had been waiting earlier. She walked out of the building smiling, holding papers in her hand. A man followed behind her, speaking kindly. "Welcome aboard," he said. "Welcome aboard." Those words echoed in my chest like thunder. That was the moment. The moment I understood. It wasn't my grades. It wasn't my skills. It wasn't my effort. It was my skin. And for the first time in my life, I realized my skin spoke before I ever opened my mouth. By the time I turned 21, I had learned something most girls my age never had to think about. Hope could be heavy. Not the soft kind of hope you whisper into birthday candles, but the kind you carry like a sack of stones on your back, walking uphill with every step. After that first job rejection at Harrington Textiles, I told myself it had been bad luck. Just one bad day. Just one wrong office. Just one man with a cold heart. But life, as I would soon learn, rarely gives you just one lesson. It repeats them until you understand. Mama didn't say, "I told you so," when I got home that day. She didn't scold me or lecture me. She simply looked at my face. And she knew. "You hungry?" she asked softly. I shook my head. Not because I wasn't hungry, but because the lump in my throat made swallowing feel impossible. She didn't push. Instead, she placed a cup of warm tea in my hands and sat across from me at the kitchen table. "You'll try again," she said. Not a question. A statement. "I will," I whispered. And I meant it. God help me. I meant it with every piece of my young heart. Over the next 2 years, I knocked on more doors than I could count. Banks, offices, stores, factories, anywhere that posted a sign reading, "Help wanted." Each time I dressed carefully. Each time I carried my diploma. Each time I practiced my smile in the mirror before leaving home. "Good morning," I would say to my reflection. "My name is Lillian Johnson, and I'm here about the position." I said it so many times, I could recite it in my sleep. And yet, every door had its own version of no. Some were polite. Some were cruel. Some didn't even bother hiding their reasons. One afternoon, I walked into a small accounting office on Pine Street. The sign outside read, "Clerk needed, experience preferred." My heart fluttered with cautious excitement. I had practiced bookkeeping at school. I knew numbers. Numbers didn't care about skin color. Or so I thought. Inside, the office smelled like ink and dust. Papers were stacked neatly along the walls, and a ceiling fan spun lazily overhead. A middle-aged man sat behind the front desk, flipping through a ledger. "Excuse me," I said. He looked up. At first, his expression was neutral. Then his eyes traveled across my face. And just like before, something shifted. "Yes," he asked. "I'm here about the clerk position," I said. He leaned back slightly in his chair. "You got experience?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. "I studied bookkeeping in school. I graduated with honors." That word, honors, always made me proud. Or at least it used to. He tapped his pen against the desk. "We're looking for someone who fits the environment," he said slowly. Fits the environment. I had heard phrases like that before. Words that meant something without saying it out loud. "I'm hardworking," I said carefully. "And I learn fast." He smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind that hides sharp edges. "I'm sure you are," he said. "But our clients expect a certain appearance." There it was. Not shouted. Not written. But clear as daylight. Appearance. My skin. My existence. I stood there for a moment, feeling the heat crawl up my neck. "Thank you for your time," I said. My voice remained steady. Mama had taught me that dignity was the last thing they could take, unless I handed it to them myself. So I walked out with my head high, even as my chest burned. After dozens of rejections, I took whatever work I could find. Cleaning houses, washing laundry, scrubbing floors. Just like Mama. Just like the generations before her. Each morning, I woke before sunrise, tied an apron around my waist, and walked to homes that were bigger than anything I had ever known. Homes with polished floors, soft carpets, rooms nobody used, and women who barely looked at me when giving instructions. "Kitchen first," they would say. "Don't forget the baseboards. Use the back entrance." Always the back entrance. Never the front. Never the same doors guests used. I told myself it was temporary. Just until someone gave me a chance. Just until the right door opened. But months turned into years. And doors stayed shut. One evening, after a long day of cleaning, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands. They were rough. Dry. Cracked from soap and bleach. Not the hands of a secretary. Not the hands of a clerk. Not the hands of the woman I once dreamed of becoming. Mama walked into the room quietly. "You thinking too loud again," she said. I laughed softly. She always said that when my face carried worry. I thought education was supposed to change things, I said. She sat beside me. It does, she replied. Then why does it feel like nothing changed? I asked. She took my hands into hers. Her hands were rough too. Older. More worn. But steady. Because change don't happen all at once, she said. Sometimes it takes a whole generation just to crack the door open. Her words stayed with me long after she left the room. A whole generation. Just to crack the door. By the time I turned 23, something inside me had changed. Not my dreams. Not my determination. But my understanding. I realized that waiting politely wasn't enough. Working hard wasn't always enough. Being qualified wasn't always enough. Because sometimes, the rules were written long before you were born. And they weren't written for you. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I remember the sound of water tapping against the window of Mrs. Calloway's kitchen while I scrubbed dishes at the sink. Mrs. Calloway was different from the others. Not kind exactly, but not cruel. She watched me quietly that day, leaning against the doorway with a cup of tea in her hand. "You're educated, aren't you?" she asked suddenly. The question surprised me. "Yes, ma'am," I replied. "High school graduate." "Yes, ma'am." She nodded slowly. "Then why are you washing my dishes?" The words weren't mocking. They were curious. Honest. And for the first time in years, someone had asked the question out loud. Why? Why indeed? "I've tried to get office work," I said carefully. "But nobody seems to be hiring." She studied my face for a long moment. Then she said something that would change the direction of my life. "There's a community center on Oak Street," she said. "They help people find work. Training programs. Classes." Hope flickered in my chest. Small. Fragile. But alive. "I didn't know that," I said. "Most people don't," she replied. She placed her cup on the counter and walked away. But before leaving the kitchen, she paused. "You're too bright to stay invisible," she said. Invisible. That word hit me harder than any insult ever had. Because it was true. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house. My mind replayed her words again and again. "You're too bright to stay invisible." For years, I had been knocking on doors that refused to see me. Maybe it was time to find doors built for people like me. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for permission. Maybe it was time to build my own path. By the time I turned 35, I was no longer the timid girl who once stood trembling in the lobby of Harrington Textiles. Life had taken that girl, pressed her flat like paper, and written new words across her soul. Words like endurance. Words like dignity. Words like fight. But the truth is, courage doesn't arrive all at once. It builds slowly, brick by brick, until one day you realize the wall that once trapped you has become the foundation you stand on. And the day I stopped whispering was the day I realized my voice mattered just as much as anyone else's. The community center on Oak Street had changed my life. Not overnight. Not with magic. But with opportunity. I learned typing again there. Faster this time, stronger. Learned filing systems. Learned how to answer telephones with confidence. But more than skills, I learned something even more valuable. I learned that I was not alone. There were dozens of us. Men and women who had been turned away from jobs they deserved. People who carried diplomas like badges, but still wore aprons instead of office coats. We sat together in wooden chairs under flickering fluorescent lights, practicing our letters, our resumes, our posture. And slowly something beautiful happened. We began believing in ourselves again. Mrs. Evelyn Carter ran the center. A tall black woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper voice. She wore her hair wrapped in bright scarves and carried herself like she owned every room she entered. "You walk in like you belong," she told us one morning. "Even when they pretend you don't." Her words echoed something my mother had said years before. Funny how truth repeats itself across generations. One day after class she called me aside. "Lillian," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "You ever thought about teaching?" The question stunned me. "Teaching?" I repeated. She nodded. "You explain things clearly. You help others without being asked. That's leadership." Leadership. Nobody had ever used that word to describe me before. I laughed nervously. I'm still trying to find steady work, I said. She crossed her arms. And that's exactly why you should lead, she replied. Because you know what struggle looks like. That moment planted a seed inside me. A small one. But seeds grow. At 37, I got my first real office job. Not because the world had suddenly become fair. Not because prejudice disappeared. But because persistence finally cracked a door open. It was a small insurance office run by a Black-owned business across town. The building wasn't grand. The furniture wasn't polished. But when I walked through those doors, something felt different. Safe. Welcoming. Human. The owner, Mr. Douglas, shook my hand firmly. You ready to work hard? He asked. Yes, sir, I said. You ready to prove what you're capable of? Yes, sir. He smiled warmly. Then welcome aboard. Those words, welcome aboard, once echoed in my chest like heartbreak. But this time, they felt like healing. Working there changed me in ways I never expected. For the first time in my life, I sat behind a desk. I answered telephones. I typed letters. I filed paperwork. I earned respect. Not fake respect. Not polite tolerance. Real respect. Every paycheck felt like victory. Every completed task felt like rebellion against every voice that once told me I didn't belong. And slowly my confidence grew. Not loud. Not flashy. But steady. Like roots pushing deep into soil. Years passed. Mama grew older. Her back bent from decades of scrubbing floors. But every time she visited my office, her eyes shined with pride. You did it, she whispered once, touching the edge of my desk. No, I said softly. We did it. Because truth be told, nothing I achieved belonged to me alone. It belonged to every woman before me who had endured silence. Every man who worked twice as hard for half the reward. Every child who dared to dream anyway. But even as progress came, prejudice did not disappear. It changed shape. Became quieter. More hidden. But still present. One afternoon, I answered a phone call from a new client. Good afternoon, I said cheerfully. Douglas Insurance Services, this is Lillian speaking. There was a pause on the line. Then a voice said, Can I speak to someone else? I can help you, sir, I replied calmly. Another pause. Then, someone more qualified. I felt the familiar sting in my chest. That old, bitter feeling. But this time, I didn't shrink. I am qualified, I said firmly. Silence followed. Then reluctantly, Fine, he muttered. And we continued the conversation. After I hung up, my hands trembled slightly. Not from fear. From memory. From history pressing against the present. But something had changed. Years ago, that moment would have broken me. Now it strengthened me. At 42, I became a supervisor. The promotion felt unreal. Me. The girl who once sat ignored in waiting rooms. The girl who walked home with rejection folded in her purse. Now leading others. Now training new employees. Now speaking with authority. The day Mr. Douglas handed me the promotion letter, I cried. Not politely. Not quietly. But fully. Because I remembered every door that slammed shut in my face. And every step it took to get here. But the true turning point of my life didn't happen inside an office. It happened outside, on a warm summer afternoon that changed everything. That was the day I decided I would stop whispering and start speaking for others.